for inviting me. That's good, so that other people can watch it later. Yeah, really thanks to Brenda. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak, and I love the idea of 21 Days of Kindness. It really speaks to all the things that I agree with, so I was really, really thrilled to be asked to speak. As she mentioned, I'm going to chat about functional medicine, which is what I do, and circadian rhythm, which I am relatively newly obsessed with, but I just think it's actually just fundamental to our health and one of the areas that's very rarely spoken about, which is why I wanted to share about it tonight. I didn't, excuse me, I didn't randomly choose this photo here on the first page. I chose it on purpose. And you might see two women sticking their heads out the window with some sunshine streaming in. And that is because I'm going to be talking about that later, not to show off their bums or anything like that. I'm more interested in where their faces are out the window. So yeah, as we go along, you'll learn more about that. So let's see if I can go across. I can. So I am going to be talking just briefly about who I am. Then I'll speak about what is functional medicine, because perhaps some of you don't know about it, and I'd love you to learn about it, because for me it's been life-changing. And then I'll speak about what is circadian rhythm, and then how I use circadian rhythm for my health, because as I'm going to speak about later, lately I've really been feeling that unless I'm doing these things, I don't really feel that I should be sharing about them. So I really do try to do all of these things. And I'll be talking about how it can impact on your health, both positively and negatively, and what you can do, or what I would invite you to do, to use light and darkness for your health. So a little bit about me. As Brenda mentioned, I'm a doctor. Before that, I studied English literature and philosophy. I was always the kind of person who wanted to know why. I was that child asking all the questions, and that has kind of continued. I've never just been satisfied with just because. After that degree, I worked for a year as a care assistant and a cleaner in a hospital to kind of figure out whether that really was what I wanted to do. Did I want to do medicine? And I decided yes. So I studied that in Dublin for 4 years. Then I worked for a number of years as a doctor in hospitals in Cork and then in Australia. And then I came back to Dublin and I worked there as part of the GP scheme. I've done a diploma in tropical medicine, and I've done lots of other trainings in kind of mindfulness-based things like mindfulness-based stress reduction, which I love, and yoga and other things like that. I'm a mum. I've had 3 kids. I have 2 boys, Harry and Arthur, and then my daughter Zoe died when she was just a little baby. That was almost 4 years ago now. And I found functional medicine, I suppose, really due to my own health problems and that kind of questioning where I wasn't really happy with the answers that I was getting about my own health. And I just continued to kind of dig further and further until I found functional medicine. And I am the first doctor in Ireland to be fully qualified with an American institute called the Institute of Functional Medicine. And that was a really brilliant training. It took me a couple of years to complete, but I've adored it. And it's honestly transformed the way I see the human body and the way I see medicine. And I know that, yeah, there's no going back to the old style of medicine for me. While I think it's brilliant for tons of things, I think there's still some big gaps in it. And for me, functional medicine fills those gaps. As I said, the last few years, I've actually been spending less time practicing medicine and more time focusing on myself. And I have been, being with my kids and really trying to be as healthy as I can for them. And lately now, I really want to share all of that stuff, all my learning and the things that I really do personally. And I think it's that practical element that for many people can be missing. So that's the bit that I love to teach about. So what is functional medicine? Anybody who comes from a health background can study functional medicine. There are some amazing functional medicine nutritionists or functional medicine psychologists or functional medicine nurses. So you don't have to be a doctor to study functional medicine. You can come from all sorts of health backgrounds. For me, really, it's about, it's just kind of like broader. It's not just, I feel sad and I have depression and I'm going to take a medication. It's just kind of much more broad. It's taking all of the things about who you are as a person. So your environment, your upbringing, your food you eat, how you sleep, whether you have enough vitamin D, everything about you, and trying to figure out which of those pieces are impacting on your brain's ability to function well and to feel happy. And then once you and your practitioner have figured that out, then you try to address how do you actually go about changing that for good, so that while in the Western normal model, which I practiced for many years, and I think is still very valuable in many ways, the answer would just be take this medication or go to talking therapy or counseling. Here, you're kind of trying to dig down to what the actual cause is and then trying to reverse that cause so that you actually get rid of the problem instead of kind of just putting a plaster or a bandage onto it to reduce the symptoms. So here, as you can probably see on my screen, they've taken depression as an example, and they're saying that there are many causes, and these are only some, there's lots of other ones that could impact on somebody's having depression. So vitamin D deficiency might be one, or pre-diabetes, which is your ability to regulate sugar, or antibiotic use. That's a really interesting one. So every time you take an antibiotic, you are actually increasing your risk of lots of illnesses. And antibiotics are amazing and life-saving, and we want to have antibiotics, but we also should be aware of the risks of antibiotics and how they can impact on our microbiome, which is a colony of bacteria that live inside our bellies, inside our gut, and actually all over our body, on our skin, in our mouth, kind of everywhere really. And they changing that colony of bacteria can have huge health implications. And that research about that microbiome idea is really popular at the moment, which is brilliant. And I think now over the next few years, more and more people are going to be talking about that. And I think people will be using antibiotics less, or with more what's called kind of antibiotic stewardship, where we're not just handing them out all the time. We're going to be more careful and cautious with them. And then other things like omega-3 deficiency, or how your thyroid works. And then on the flip side, here is the picture with inflammation, if you can see, and they're saying that lots of illnesses could be caused by the same thing. So equally, you could have put vitamin D deficiency in the center of the screen there, and you could say that that could cause lots of different illnesses. So in some ways, it's a bit less straightforward than the normal medical model, where you might go to your doctor and tell them your symptoms, and then they give you a diagnosis, and then they give you a medicine. That might seem great and simple, but for some people it is. And then for other people, maybe they're still left with symptoms, or they don't think that they want to take medication for life, or they just want to dig a bit deeper. And for those people, if that's you, then functional medicine is really, really wonderful. So yeah, it's not about symptom suppression, as I've just said. It's not about, say, so if you go to your functional medicine practitioner or you start to look into this, you say, oh, I've got pain in my tummy and diarrhea. They're not going to just hand you a supplement to get rid of that. They're really going to dig into the kind of emotional factors, the physical factors, the psycho-spiritual factors, all of it, and see if there's anything that can be adjusted and sort of tweaked to make sure that those symptoms can be made better, or hopefully just be gone altogether. And in our current system of medicine, we kind of think of the body like a machine. You know, we have all these separate areas, like we have the heart, we have the gut, we have a doctor for the eyes, we have a doctor for the skin. And sometimes things can get missed because it's sort of so separated, and we have this idea that each of the pieces can just be fixed alone, when I think really it's pretty clear that all of them are acting together, and every single thing we do and every medication we give actually does have an impact on every part of our bodies, not just the area that you have the symptom from. So yeah, that is kind of the basics of functional medicine. And how can it help? And I just wanted to just briefly speak about myself, because I think that's a good example. I don't want to divulge other people's information. So I have used the functional medicine basics for my own self, and have noticed absolutely dramatic improvements in so many of my symptoms, like a really lifelong issues with my menstrual cycle, heavy bleeding, painful periods, bloating, diarrhea around my periods, all sorts of things, which are literally now gone. So I have now got no problems with my periods. I have zero symptoms. If I didn't keep track, I wouldn't know that my period was coming. And then I also had long-standing problems with IBS, which are, I'd say, 98% gone, unless I do the things that I know that I shouldn't do, and then they can come back. And then, just as I was kind of trying to say earlier, all these changes that I made to my life have had huge knock-on effects on other things that maybe weren't so obvious or so problematic for me. Like, my mood is way, way better and more stable. My energy is much improved. My skin is better, and my immune system is so much stronger. I would have frequently had coughs or colds or infections, and now I essentially never do, or very, very rarely. Lots of other things, but for me, it really has been actually just life-changing, and I feel like a different person. And that's over a number of years. It's not just a quick fix. It's loads of different changes that I've made on an ongoing basis. Some of it with help from a practitioner, and some just myself from reading about things. So yeah, the basics of it really is that we're trying to help people prevent chronic illness. Chronic lifestyle diseases like heart attacks, strokes, diabetes make up, about 85% of our healthcare costs on an ongoing basis. So the things like an infection or, trauma, those things actually don't really cost us that much in terms of healthcare. But it's these lifestyle conditions that are really costing us as a society. And that's obviously only the monetary cost, but as we all know and appreciate, I think that the personal cost is just way more important than that. How it affects us, how it affects our families. If we lose somebody to a chronic lifestyle illness that could be prevented, those things are devastating, I think. And I want more people to know about how functional medicine can help to improve that. So yeah, and I think I love as well that it talks about how health is not just the absence of disease. So okay, you might not have heart disease, but do you feel good? Do you wake up feeling refreshed? Do you have energy to play with your children or your grandchildren? Do you have energy to not lose your patience in your family, in your relationships? All of these things are also actually really important for our quality of life. And it doesn't just mean not being sick in bed. I think there's just a lot more to it than that. So now I'm going to go into circadian rhythm, and I picked these two pictures, which you might be like, what are these two pictures about? How do they relate to one another? So on the left, you have the sheep who are outside on a lovely mountain looking at the sunset with the lake reflecting and the gorgeous colors of the sun. And here you have a lovely woman, and she's wearing her blue blocking glasses, which you might be able to see here. And she's looking at her screen, and she's inside. And they're pretty contrasting pictures. And we'll be talking now about the differences between being outside in sunlight and being inside with artificial light of all kinds. So whether that's from screens or overhead lighting, yeah, that's basically what we're going to be talking about. So circadian rhythm is a 24-hour rhythm that is essentially just light and dark, and that repeats, as we all know, every single 24 hours. We have dark light, dark light, dark light every 24 hours. And every living thing on the planet is impacted by this circadian rhythm. So you all have seen dandelions and daisies that are all closed up into their ball in the morning. And then as the sun comes out, they slowly open. And then in the evening time, they slowly close again. Or you know that certain animals are nocturnal and they only come out at night, and other animals are awake during the day and they're always asleep during the night. And humans are also impacted by this circadian rhythm, and we are impacted by it massively, way more, I think, than people realize or talk about or are aware of. And I mentioned briefly in a talk that I gave recently that, you know, it's really only a tiny blip in time that we've actually not been abiding by this circadian rhythm, this natural law, because light bulbs, let's say, were only invented about 140 years ago, and humans have evolved over anywhere between 6 million to 350,000 years, depending on what type of human you want to talk, like what evolution you want to talk about. But either way, it's 140 years in 350,000 years. So it's really a tiny, tiny amount of time that we haven't always been outside getting this input of the sun or the dark, and having lights and screens is actually super new for our human bodies. Um, and I think we believe somehow that we can just get away with it, or that we're fine doing all the lovely things that we do. And don't get me wrong, I love having lights. I have my lights on now so that you can see me, and I've got my computer plugged in, and there's tons of benefits to all those things. But I think if we can maybe just be a bit mindful of them and try and give our bodies as much signal of safety signals as you can, that can really have a big impact on your health. So yeah, so it's a natural internal process that regulates your sleep-wake cycle, and not only your sleep-wake cycle, but tons of other hormonal processes that are happening in your body are kind of governed by this light or dark cycle. And you have certain genes in your DNA that are called clock genes, and they affect everything from your toes up to the top of your head. Every process in your body is affected by these clock genes. So let's say testosterone, for example, which is a male hormone. So I think there aren't many men here, but anyway, I'll give it as an example. Has these clock genes, and you know, more testosterone is released at night, and then a little bit less in the morning, and then it gets a bit more in the afternoon. And that's throughout every human on the planet, and that's all controlled by these clock genes, and would be dependent on receiving the right signals from your environment, that you need to have sun or dark in order to produce these right amount of testosterone. There's a good few studies on all of this circadian rhythm, but it's definitely kind of more a recent thing, and they're still only learning lots of the things about it. And I think it's going to be a really fascinating thing to just keep learning about, because it can be so basic, which I'll talk about on the next slide, what you need to do to keep your circadian rhythm healthy. But then, you know, obviously the science behind it can be much more complex. But the basics of it is that the light from the sun, and it doesn't actually have to be sunny, it could be cloudy or rainy, it just has to be actual daylight. So your light outside, whatever that is good enough. That enters your retina, which is inside your eye, and then that sends a message directly to a part of your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And then that sends messages all over your body to, let's say, your pineal gland, which is also in your brain. And then that releases melatonin, which is a sleep hormone. So let's just say you wake up in the morning, you go straight outside and you look at the sunrise, and the light enters your eyes, and it tells your brain, okay, tonight at midnight is when you need to release melatonin for a great night's sleep. And your body says, okay, I'll do that. Whereas if you wake up, you check your phone, you're doing your scrolling, you turn on all the lights overhead, and you get LED lights, and then you go to work straight away. You just go into your room to work, so you don't actually go outside at all to even get to the car or anything like that. Your body does not get that signal of sunrise and light, and so it just won't make that same amount of melatonin that night because it hasn't gotten the message. It doesn't know that it was sunrise. It's kind of just confused, and it thinks, I'm not sure, I'll just make a bit of melatonin, but I'm not going to make all that melatonin because I don't think it was sunrise. So it's really kind of important that we try to give our bodies as many of those safety signals as we can. So as I said there, that example was sleep. So that's one hormone called melatonin that helps with sleep. That's really directly impacted by this circadian rhythm. But there's lots of other hormones like appetite hormones like leptin and ghrelin are also impacted by circadian rhythm. So if you're, lots of women will say, oh, I'm eating really well and I'm exercising, but I just can't lose weight, or, they have gained weight maybe during the lockdowns and all that kind of stuff. And when you understand how important sunlight is, and dark, sorry, not just light, it's also dark, having both of the things at the right times, you know that having too much light at night or too much dark in the morning can impact on your insulin levels and your hunger hormones and all those things. So I think for me, functional medicine has just showed me that it's not as simple as we think sometimes, but in a good way, that we can actually make it simple for ourselves by just having some healthy habits that are actually pretty easy to put into place, which we'll talk about now. You'd probably have experienced severe circadian dysfunction if you've ever traveled to somewhere where you've had jet lag. Like, that's on the extreme end because you've really disrupted your rhythm from one day to the next, and you might have felt sick or sleeping at the wrong time or not hungry or hungry. And then some of you maybe do shift work, which can also disrupt your circadian rhythm. And then others of us might just kind of be a little bit off, as in we mightn't have gotten the sunlight in the morning, but we're not like totally off. But even that little bit off can have a bigger impact over a longer period of time, over years or months. So yeah. So yeah, what's going wrong? So why are we having this circadian dysfunction? And really, as I've kind of just mentioned, it's that our environment isn't really allowing us to get the right clues or cues from our environment, because of artificial light, because of light bulbs, and because of us really not spending much time outdoors anymore. Even let's say 2 generations ago, maybe we would have been spending way more time outdoors. Most people would have been farming, or at least not driving everywhere. Maybe they walked to town or drove to town, or I think their lives just would have been more outdoors than ours are now. So they would have had a much more normal circadian rhythm thanks to being outside more. And when we're not outside more, and when we have more artificial light and screens, our bodies just become a bit confused, and then they can't produce the right hormones at the right time in the right amount. And so then they kind of just sometimes stop producing the right hormones, which can cause all sorts of problems, which we'll go into. So now I just wanted to say what I do and what I would invite you to do. And I'm going to go back over these same things at the end. But the most important one for me is going outside in the morning at sunrise if you can, or if you can't, go out as close to sunrise as you can. So you know your own life best. I can't force you to do anything, obviously, but make it work for you. So what I do is, no matter what, I stick my head out the window like the women with their bums poking out at the beginning, at least for 5 minutes every day. And optimally, or if I can, I'd go out for longer. I might try and bring my kids out. I have a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old, so I might even go on the trampoline with them, or I'll do anything to get them out and me out. I'll yeah, say I'm going to run around in the grass with them in bare feet. I'll just do whatever it takes to get us all outside. And maybe we could be out for 15 or 20 minutes, and then we can either have had our breakfast or have our breakfast, depending on where we are and what we're up to. And then I try and spend more time outside. So if I can get out again, I'll go out and eat my lunch outside, or go out for 5 minutes after my lunch. And then I try to go out again at sunset. So let's say I'm cooking dinner, I can piggyback my habit onto something else. So I know when I'm cooking dinner, maybe it's around sunset time. So I'll be like, okay, 5 minutes, quickly go outside, get some sun on my face, or literally just open the window in the kitchen and put my head out the window for 5 minutes, if that's all I can do. So for me, that's the most important part. If you already spend loads of time outside, that's amazing. But make sure that you're not wearing sunglasses. And if you can, some lenses might have UV blocking on them. So just maybe to be aware of whether or not your glasses or your lenses have a UV blocker. And if they do, then you could wear them less, or try and sit out without them for a couple of minutes if you can. Then in the evening time, which I'm not doing today, but I normally do, I do wear the blue blocking glasses. I'm not massively into like hacks and gimmicks, and like in some ways this is kind of like a plaster that I talked about earlier. It would obviously be better if I didn't have all the lights on in the room. If I maybe just had a lamp on, and low lighting in the room would be much more soothing for my circadian rhythm, and it would not be so confusing for my body. But if you're going to be on your computer working or watching a movie, and you can get blue light blocking glasses, then I would do that. I do that. And yeah, here I say to reduce screen time in the evenings, the best is 2 hours before bed. If you can do that, that will allow your melatonin to be produced at the right time. And there's tons of studies about that, showing that the melatonin actually really is impacted by being on screens up until late, which I know we're doing now, admittedly, but we have to learn. And yeah, I was actually just chatting to Brenda about candles, and we were saying how much we love candles. And you could also have a lovely fire. And those types of light are fine because it's kind of a red light. It's not got lots of blue spectrum in it. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail, but I suppose if you just think about it, basically, we've evolved over all those thousands of years making fire and having fire. So we have actually managed to still be able to regulate our hormones with fire. It's just the tons of LEDs that can be more damaging. Then once you get into your bedroom, I would definitely recommend not having electronics in your bedroom. And I kind of look around my room if I'm going somewhere else and look for light coming in everywhere. So I really want the room to be absolutely black. Like in my kids' room, I have blackout blinds and then blackout curtains on top. And I've got I don't have an electronic alarm clock or any little plugs with green, like here actually, I don't know if you can see that properly, but there's like a green light on the plug. All of those, you can just think, oh, that's nothing. But again, there's studies to show that even tiny, tiny amounts of light will actually impact on us, of that particular type of light, an LED light. And that's even if your eyes are closed, it still impacts on you. And I also would recommend, if you don't have if you don't have a dark room, an eye mask is good. I love this one because it has these kind of pads for your eyes. It's just really comfortable. You can look them up, and I find that it stays on better than the kind of other ones that you might get for free. So I did buy some things. I like free things, but I do buy 2 of those things. And yeah, being in a routine of the same sleep-wake cycle definitely helps with your circadian rhythm. It's nice to think, oh, I'm going to sleep in on the weekends and things like that, but it really just doesn't actually help you. It doesn't help your health. And if you can stick to a more stable wake and sleep time, it's just much healthier for you. And if you look around in nature, you know, that is how it is. They all, animals and plants, they don't say, oh, I'll sleep in today. They wake up with the sun and they go to sleep with the sun. And that is just kind of the most natural way to maintain your circadian rhythm. So yeah, I don't want to harbor on about this bit too much, but I think it is important to note that it's actually really important. And there's loads of diseases that are associated with circadian rhythm disruption. So things like breast cancer, there's lots of studies about that. And there's clock cells inside your breast. And when those are not functioning well, you've got a higher likelihood of breast cancer. And then there's lots of studies. One really important, huge study showed that nurses working night shift had an increased risk of breast cancer compared to those working a day shift. It impacts on fertility, both male and female fertility, but there's more and more evidence that testosterone is rapidly declining over the last maybe 20, 40 years, that each year it seems that the levels of testosterone in young and otherwise healthy men have just gotten lower and lower, and maybe even decreasing by up to 1% every year, which would mean that, let's say, a 20-year-old man now has only half the testosterone of a 20-year-old man 50 years ago, which is massive. Now, I don't think that's only circadian rhythm. It's obviously multifactorial. But we do know that all of these things are tied to circadian rhythm, and just getting it right, I think, can be hugely beneficial. So your gut is impacted by light. That hormone that's mostly associated with sleep, called melatonin, is really important in our gut. Your gut lining is just like a tiny hair breadth thick, literally one hair is the outer lining of your gut. And melatonin can help to keep that lining smooth and make sure that it doesn't get any tiny holes, which can cause problems like autoimmune problems and other problems. So if you want really good melatonin levels, then trying to abide by the normal circadian rhythm is really, really helpful. It can impact on our brains, like things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, which for women is super important. Alzheimer's is now more and more being diagnosed in women, and yeah, there's lots of research about that happening now too. As I mentioned before, your immune system is super dependent on light. I haven't spoken really about vitamin D, but I think most people know now that you get your vitamin D from the sun. That's separate to the circadian rhythm benefits. But yeah, not knowing when it's night and day impacts on our immune systems, and also things like heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, pretty much everything. All these chronic lifestyle conditions are associated with circadian rhythm dysfunction. So it's important. So yeah, here I just have literally copy and pasted that slide, because I would invite you to just take a minute or two to look through that list and to think to yourself, which of them could I start with? Is there any one of those that I might be able to do this week to try? And my tip for making sure that you do it is to ask a friend if they're going to do it with you, or maybe your partner or your child or your mom or dad. If you can find somebody to do it with, you're so much more likely to actually do it. So you could share this talk with them, or you could just ring them up and text them and say, oh, will you, can I text you tomorrow to tell you that I've gone out for sunrise? And you can ask them to join you. And I think doing that is huge. And the other things, like having your dark room, those things can take a bit of time. You might think, God, yeah, actually, there is a street light just outside my window. Maybe I should get a blackout blind. And you can go and think about, oh, how can I order one? Which one should I get? All those kinds of things that maybe we don't think are important health habits, but like it's as simple as that. It's as simple as thinking, which of these can I put into my life easily, or successfully, and how can I do that? Maybe some of you do already do those things. I can't see the chat actually, Brenda. Maybe I can open this up to see if anybody, does anybody have any question? Oh, here, I can open the chat. No chats yet. If anybody has questions about that, or yeah, if they have comments, I'd love to hear them, because for me, that part, how can we actually make this possible for ourselves, is kind of the most important. The science part is all fine, but if we can't actually do the things, then it's no good. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions or comment on it. Oh, they're good. What about using a sunrise, sunset alarm clock, napping? Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Yeah, the sunrise, sunset alarm clock, I think it's fine. I'm not totally against it, but I don't have one myself. I don't know, is it a green, like, is it totally dark when it's off, or can you still see some kind of light? If you can still see some kind of light, I wouldn't be a fan, but if it's dark until sunrise, then I'd be okay with it. Don't know. Napping, I think napping's fine. There's a really good podcast by a guy called Matthew Walker. If you Google Matthew Walker and Rangan Chatterjee, and he talks about napping and a lot, but essentially you want to keep your naps kind of short. So a sleep cycle is around 45 minutes, and you don't want to go like too long over that. So keep them shorter, and yeah, naps can be good. Clarify not to wear sunglasses. Yes, that is right, Bernie. I don't wear sunglasses anymore. That's a huge topic. I do wear a hat, so I'd wear a cap or a sun hat to protect my eyes. And if it was super, super sunny, sometimes I might wear sunglasses, but I make sure that I also have times when I don't wear sunglasses. If you make sure that you go out in the morning at sunrise, your body already gets used to the sun and knows that the sun is coming, and it can prepare itself better. Whereas, let's say you don't go out at all until noon when the sun is really strong, and then you just put your eyes up to the sun and it's super strong, that can maybe be damaging. So I'd say just go with caution, and obviously you don't want to hurt your eyes by looking directly at the sun or anything like that. So yeah, I do wear way less sunglasses than I used to, and occasionally I still might wear them. My kids use a night light. Should I try and get them to sleep in the dark? One is red and one is a yellow. My kids beg me for a night light, and I haven't let them get a night light. You might think it's mean, but I haven't. But red, if you're going to get a night light, I would get a red one. Red is much better. It's kind of on the opposite scale of blue, and red is, as I said, the color of the fire, and the candle is more of a red light. So yeah, I'd keep the red one and get another red one maybe for the other child if they really want to keep them. Should you be altering your sleep wake cycle to match the sunrise sunset at each sleep? Yes, Aurea, I think Aurea maybe, definitely. So here in Ireland, we have a much broader range of sunset, sunrise. Obviously, if you live at the equator, it's the same all year round. So they have the same sunset, sunrise every day. And we would have to adjust our sunrise, sunset times because there's a huge variation. Sometimes in the summer, obviously, the time is so massive that I would go to bed before or not be awake just at sunrise, but then I do my best to still go out as early as I can or as late as I can, so that I still have the same kind of inputs. And yeah, here we just do have a much larger range than in other places. Christine and children night lights. Yes, if you're going to get a night light, I'd get a red one. You can also use a salt lamp. I don't know if you know those. Those are kind of nice, and they have a reddish light from them too, and they're very muted. So those could be an option. I don't know, but I have not let my kids got a night light, but they do still sometimes run scared into my room, so that also disrupts my sleep. So maybe if a nightlight is working for you, I'd go for a red one. Oh, hi, Paula. Thank you. I'm definitely going to try your tips this week. Time of year makes me feel much more tired, sluggish. Totally. And I think that is probably because we tend not to go out as much now because it's cold and wet, and we just don't have those same cues. You know, when you're in the summer and you spend the whole day at the beach and your whole family just falls into bed and sleeps amazingly. And maybe it's because you were active all day, but maybe it's also because you had so much light input and you were outside all day. So yeah, I'd love if you tried them, and I'd love to hear how you get on. Oh, thank you, Bernie. Thank you for coming and listening. I really appreciate it. If you do work night shifts in a rotation, can you recommend some things to focus on during those days, weeks? Yeah, that's huge, Lana. And everybody is different, but essentially trying to stick to a routine is still good. So let's say, so what some people find really helpful is actually, let's say, not eating at night, even if you're working a night shift. Now, this isn't going to work for everybody, but I've worked loads of night shifts myself, so I know what it's like. And lots of people in night shifts have loads of different habits. Like some might eat their whole dinner and some would only have a tiny snack. Everyone does their own thing. But for some people, not eating at all at night can actually feel much better. So you'd eat before work and then you'd eat again when you get home, and you could eat maybe when you wake up. So you'd still have 3 meals during that period, but you don't try not to eat at night, because traditionally your body obviously wouldn't be eating at night, and you you wouldn't your circadian clock isn't used to eating at night. So that's one thing that people can try. Other things that are helpful are, again, like you can use glasses to help you. So you can get clear framed blue blocking glasses at the pharmacist. Whether or not you have a prescription, you can get ones that look like this, that have a kind of a blue blocking on them. They can be helpful. Again, that Matthew Walker podcast, I'm pretty sure Matthew Walker and Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, I think they talk about night shift a lot in that. So that's another place to look for more info. And making some of those changes can really make a big difference to night shift work. Working 10 plus hours a day in front, apart from wearing blue block glasses, do you have any other suggestions? Can you take any breaks, Catherine? Like, even I would, so definitely blue block glasses if you're doing 10 plus hours a day on the screen. You can get a yellow pair that aren't orange like this, that are slightly even more blue blocked than the clear type. So you could look into that. But also, if it was me, I would make sure that I go out to the window and put my head out the window, or walk downstairs if I'm in a big office building, and just actually have normal daylight in my eyes as much as I can. Light from oil diffusers, is that okay? I suppose it would depend what color the light is, Angela. Again, any kind of green or blue or bright white lights could impact on your sleep. If you have an oil diffuser, could you, sometimes what I do is I just get a piece of black duct tape and I put a tiny piece of black duct tape over light, like a smoke alarm. I put a tiny piece of black duct tape over my green smoke alarm, and I still check it, but I just didn't want that green light. Can I also repeat the name of the lamp you suggested instead of a nightlight? I've seen it's called a salt lamp. You can get it on anywhere, I'd say Amazon or a health food shop. And it's not a particular brand. It's just kind of, it's literally made of salt, and it has a light inside it. And it's actually supposed to be also very good for your chest and can improve the air quality. And it gives out a really orangey, reddish light. Thanks, Lana. The eye mask that I have is called, the name on it is Remedy, but I'm pretty sure that it's from a brand called Blue Blocks, and it was a bit eye-wateringly expensive, but I would recommend it because I've tried loads of them and sometimes they can just fall off or I don't like them. Yeah, I think it's from Blue Blocks. I can post that somewhere. Salt lamp is about £16. Yeah. I think the mask is quite expensive, but look, if you can't get this mask, get a different mask, or use a cheap mask from the pharmacy. I'd say you can get one for a £5 you don't have to get an expensive one. I think it's still worth it. Yeah, so if you want to contact me, you can. I have I'll write down the website. The podcast is Rangan Chatterjee and Matthew Walker. That's all in caps lock, sorry. And he's on loads of other podcasts as well, Matthew Walker. He talks more about sleep than circadian rhythm. If you really are interested in circadian rhythm, there's a podcast called the Huberman Lab. I've just put that up there, and that goes more into the benefits of light and dark, aside from sleep, or as well as sleep, but the things like weight and other health things, not only sleep. And that one's a bit scientific, the Huberman Lab one. But it's still anybody can listen to it. You don't have to be a scientific background. Oh, amazing. Mental health practitioner, working in GP practice, really helpful. Thank you, Louise. I'm delighted. Yeah, and I think the practicality element of it for me, as I've already said, is just so important. Like if you're talking to a client or for yourself, if you can tell a friend, I'm going out at sunrise, I'm going to text you, or those accountability things, or tagging it on to something else, like I know when I'm making my dinner, I should also be thinking about getting daylight for even a couple of minutes. Those kind of things for me are important. Thanks, Olivia. Thanks so much. Oh, thank you, Byron. Oh, amazing. You're the next speaker. Well, I look forward to attending. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was brilliant.
Thanks, Brenda.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions? Sarah, would you mind I sneakily screenshot it, like the to-do list, and I might just share it with everyone by email, if that's okay, just that slide?
Please do, yeah, love that.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So that's us for tonight, everybody. I think we're all females here, so apart from Byron. That was brilliant. I will send out a wee email with that wee slide of kind of the recommendation. Byron saying ha 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 in the chat. So this will be the day one. This is our first day. Tonight's talk is really our gift to yourself by coming to this talk and receiving the information. And it might be an idea to focus this week on being kind to yourself with some ways to improve how you utilize light and dark. Next week, Byron, who's been chatting here, is coming on to talk about, he'll probably touch on circadian rhythm, but also about energy enhancement and fatigue. So we'll touch base over the week via email, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thanks a million, guys. Thanks.
Bye.
I hope everyone sleeps really well.
Thank you very much.